Well, a judge has just rejected the Attorney General's request to block DOGE from accessing government data. 14 states' attorneys general have grouped together in order to stop Elon Musk's, he's only the one, in court. And a judge says, actually, no, doesn't seem like you have the right to do that. So he can proceed with the things that President Trump has asked him to do. But liberals continue to melt down, trying to say we're in a constitutional crisis because of Elon Musk, that he's going to take your bank accounts. He's looking at your personal data, to which he said, we're not looking at that. We're just looking at social security information. He also reminded people that he had access to a lot of people's data at PayPal, and people still trust him, trust PayPal with their information. He could have been looking at that stuff then. But that's not stopping CNN from saying this is a constitutional crisis. Watch Stephen Miller tell CNN, actually, this is just how the government works.
Chief of Staff for Policy. Stephen, thank you so much for taking time for us. So who is in charge of DOGE?
The President of the United States.
He's the administrator of DOGE?
No, the DOGE is what was formerly U.S. Digital Services. It's an agency of the federal government that reports into the Executive Office of the President, which reports to the President of the United States.
Okay.
The way that Article 2 works is the President wins an election, and then he appoints staff, including myself, including Mike Waltz, including Susie Wiles,
yes,
including Elon Musk, and those staff report to him.
Okay, well aware.
Well aware.
Are you, though?
Are you?
Maybe you would have asked a different question.
Because I like the lesson.
Right. So the real constitutional crisis may be whether or not liberals can go judge shopping and abuse the court system in order to stop what the president has been elected to do. Mike Yoder is a constitutional attorney, and he's the founder of Citizen AG. He joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of the fact that, number one, a federal judge has just ruled against these attorneys and allowed DOGE to go forward, but the fact that they're going to continue to do this? Does it benefit us all for the court system to just let this play out? Thank you for joining us. And I'm sorry, that's a two-part question.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me on. I think the courts are just doing their job here. I mean, Judge Chutkan, I've had the pleasure of being before her numerous times in D.C., both when she was at the Superior Court and then as well as in federal court. And this was a pretty straightforward order in the sense of from the legal landscape, because they were seeking what's called a temporary restraining order. So a lot of people know that term in the context of, domestic violence or things of that sort. But in a civil case dealing with government, it's an extraordinary remedy that you have to show an imminent harm and the substantial likelihood of actually being successful with the case. And that was clearly something that they weren't able to do here. And the one thing I will say and concede is that I agree there is a constitutional crisis, and that crisis is the fact that no one's actually read it. Because if people had a knowledge of what our Constitution says, we would not be in this position, including the litigators behind that. Article 2, Section 3 clearly sets forth the take care clause, which says that the president has the obligation and duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing.
Well, you know what liberals are saying, especially in New York. They're saying this is a historic power grab by the president, that he's wanted to go through all of your personal documents, your information, wants to go through your personal treasury information, your Social Security information, and all of these things. And even if that were true, I mean, is that illegal?
It goes back to 1838 when the court held in Kendall v. United States ex rel Stokes. It's a Supreme Court decision where they said that the president has the authority within the executive to ensure government officials comply with the law. You have the Administrative Procedures Act, which allows for you to go after actions by the government that are either futile or they're wasteful. And right here, that's what he's doing. He's using the laws. The president doesn't have the power to write the laws, but he does have the power to enforce them. Go back to Andrew Jackson. He used historic precedent and all the way dating back to his presidency when he enforced the laws there. So them claiming that this is an overreach of power or that this is some sort of unprecedented attack. Elon Musk is a special advisor to the president. The president is acting within his constitutional authority under Article 2, Section 3, and they have no argument. And they try to spin it by claiming that Elon Musk is going after our data, when in reality, it's probably and almost certainly the fact that the people parroting that narrative are the ones whose data and information they're actually concerned about, since you make $213 a year, yet you somehow come out with a net worth of $40+ million, and Pelosi trades better than any algorithm could in the world if you want to run the analysis between her trades and the stocks. So I think it's pretty obvious what they're doing and what they're trying to spin this as.
What is the constitutional answer to this that liberals are screaming the most? That Congress has the sole power to set the budget and constrain the budget. What do you say to that?
Congress can set the budget, but the power of the purse is really within the fact of the fact is the Constitution doesn't even contain a spending provision. It says that Congress and the government have the authority to tax. It's under a taxing power, but the spending necessarily is implied because of the fact that if you can tax for the overall welfare of the country, you can also spend for it. So setting the budget is certainly within the power of Congress, but that doesn't also dictate how that money is spent. So that's where I'm struggling to follow their logic there, because Congress can set a budget, but the executive is the one that enforces the laws. And if the laws aren't being enforced and that budget is being spent on illicit action or illegal or unconstitutional activities, then the president certainly can enforce that.
Right. And so these firings, now he's appealed to the Supreme Court saying, I need to enforce some of these firings that I have put into place. And then liberals are saying, you actually never had that power. But the president can, in fact, decide who works for the federal government, can't he?
Within the executive agency, the president could fire a mailman tomorrow if he wanted to. This goes all the way back if you look at the issues with the vaccine mandates and what happened, where there was a lot of issue talking about how the federal government didn't impose itself they have a vaccine mandate on all the executive agencies, all the cabinet entities, so the Department of Justice, DOJ, you had all those bureaucrats were being subjected to it. But then why wasn't there a mandate for Congress? Well, that's because the executive branch, under separation of powers, cannot compel the legislative branch to do something because it falls outside that authority. As the leader of the executive branch and the president of the United States, he can enforce that. So if you work in the executive or under the president, then he is effectively, just like in a company, a CEO can terminate anyone on from an executive at the board level. He can terminate all the way down to someone that works in a factory. There's no limit there because these individuals work within the federal government and they are executive agency employed individuals. They fall under President Trump, and he has every right to terminate them. And their termination has nothing to do with the budget, because the termination isn't vacating the position or getting rid of the position necessarily. The president is simply getting rid of the person filling it, and that budget is not being affected by who, in fact, it is being set for. The budget doesn't contemplate the individual receiving the money, but rather the position that exists.
We saw a bunch of these liberal activist judges, it seems like last week in Manhattan, blocking DOGE's access to Treasury information, a judge in D.C. issuing an order to block layoffs at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So we're seeing, do you think we're going to see more of this? And will this go all the way to the Supreme Court, or does this have any teeth at all? They're just playing lawfare and trying to slow Trump's momentum.
I think that it could get to the Supreme Court on certain cases. I mean, people have to keep in mind, not every case can go all the way to the Supreme Court. It has to deal with federal law as the first and foremost issue, which most of these, of course, are dealing exclusively with the federal law here. But then the Supreme Court only hears about 300 cases a year at most. And think about that. That's almost an opinion a day on serious nationwide precedent that has massive waves. And there's over 10,000 applications. So I'm sure that the Supreme Court will take up a few of these cases. But the bottom line is the fact that these judges that get confirmed, 93% of federal judges are Democratic donors, or they have a history with the Democratic Party. The judiciary, I have no issue if someone wants to be an activist, but just get rid of their robe and run for office and become a member of Congress or your state's legislature and stop being part of the judiciary to write laws from the bench. That's the solution. Right. And I think that maybe we should audit the judiciary as well.
Yeah, get rid of the robes and run for office. I love that. That's a great line. Our audience loves you, by the way. We have tens of thousands of people watching right now. And so we love this guy.
He brought the receipts.
They're like, and how is this guy this young a constitutional attorney? We need more of you in this country.
You don't have to answer that.
You don't have to answer that.
We're not asking.
I'm happy to take anyone that wants to help, because there is very far and few of us that are on this side of the aisle fighting. I started young, and I've just sued the government every day since I got my license. So
Wow. Speaking of, though, suing the government, though, because now the government is suing on behalf of several states, and these AGs are appointed, elected officials. They're elected. And so they're wasting their taxpayer dollars by going after the Trump administration because they think that's what their electorate wants. Do they not see how wasteful this is, do you think?
I mean, I guess that really comes down to what does the electorate want, and reasonable minds can differ. And I think that if there is a state overwhelmingly that believes that these policies are unconstitutional, then that AG would necessarily have a duty to, act on behalf of the constituents. Now, whether in fact there is enough people in this country that are either so misinformed or just uneducated on what's going on as to think that trying to block Trump from auditing our government because for whatever reason, if they want to, be spending $800 so, trans individuals can weave baskets underwater in Uganda, then that's certainly up to them and their prerogative. I'm not going to opine on that. However, I think there are more futile or more actual initiatives that our country needs to be focused on. And I don't think that the AGs are out of line if they are, in fact, acting at the bequest of their constituents, even though they have no legal basis. That could be, a separate legal issue for frivolousness. But the core issue comes down to the fact is who are they acting on behalf of? Is it their constituents, or is it someone that's got deep pockets in corporate America, or is it allegiance to a political party? And that's really where I have the issue.
Bam. Yeah, that's the issue. You're right.
Mike Yoder is a constitutional attorney. We need more of him who understand the Constitution, and founder of Citizen AG. Thank you for your insight, Mike. Great to see you, and we'd love to have you back.
Anytime. Thanks, guys, for having me on.